All right, we're returning this morning to our study of the global perspective, looking at history from God's perspective, gaining that picture of what the world might have looked like, and we have looked at the various segments of world history. Last week we backed off a step, as you know, and we looked at the bigger picture from God's perspective. Why did he create this world? Why did he create angels? Why did he create the universe and men and women and so forth? And this is the philosophy of history that we proposed as we came to the end of that study last week, that men and women were created to glorify God by acknowledging his holiness. And we do that by living in humble obedience to his revelation of himself. And Jesus, of course, is the ultimate example of someone who did that. So that summarizes the basic purpose, the overall perspective of creation and of our lives. And what I would like us to do is to think together about how that affects the various stages of world history. And that's going to come next week. In preparation for that, I want us to think together this week about a passage in Scripture in the New Testament in Luke chapter 16. And so if you'll read with me this morning, Luke chapter 16, the first 13 verses. And as we read it, look at it carefully. I'm going to ask you to kind of pick it apart with me this morning as we seek to understand what Jesus is saying in this particular parable. All right? So first, let's read it together. If you will respond with the yellow print. Luke 16, 1 to 13. Now he was also saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an accounting of your management, for you can no longer be manager. The manager said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, so that when I am removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes. And he summoned each one of his master's debtors. And he began saying to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80. And his master praised the unrighteous manager, because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So I labeled this passage of Scripture the Squandering Manager. And as we begin this morning, I would like to ask you, who is involved? Who are the people involved in this passage of Scripture?
The master. The master.
Okay, you have a master, all right?
The debtors.
You have debtors, okay, eventually we'll get to them.
Manager.
You have a manager, okay? We start actually with Jesus, right? So we have Jesus first, and Jesus is speaking to
The disciples. The disciples.
the disciples, okay? So we have the disciples as they are listening to Jesus teaching, and we didn't read it, but the next verse, verse 14, says that the Pharisees were also listening. So these are the people involved in the context, and then as Jesus unfolds the story, we have a rich man, right? This is the rich man who has lots of money, and we have a manager. And everybody knows that managers walk around with phones to their ears and so forth. So these are the principles that are involved initially in this parable. What happens in the story? How does it proceed? What is Jesus saying?
Said he wasn't a good man.
Pardon me?
Said he wasn't a good man.
He wasn't a good manager, okay? How does this take place? What happens? Do you remember from what we read?
Charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions.
Okay, so the owner, the master, or the rich man, heard that the manager was wasting his possessions. All right, so somehow the rich man gets this word. We're not told how. Jesus doesn't go into all of that, but he says that this man is guilty of squandering or wasting his possessions. What does it mean to squander?
Waste.
To waste? Okay.
Spend it loosely.
All right, spend loosely. Okay.
Pocket some of the money.
Pocket some of the money. All right. Now that raises a question. When you talk about pocketing some of the money, that raises a question of the difference between squandering and stealing, or what's the other term you use in business? Embezzling, right? So if we look at squander and we look at embezzle, we have two different kinds of things. Both of them eat away at the owner's possessions. This man is not accused of stealing, I don't think. He's not accused of embezzling. He's accused of squandering, of wasting. How might that happen?
So if you have three plumbers, one charges you 200, one 150, 100. They all provide the same service, but he and he chose a plumber that charged 200.
Okay, so maybe his brother-in-law is the $300 plumber.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's one possibility.
I think it's not being intent on how you're spending it, like thinking it through, what's the wise way to spend it.
Okay, so he's apparently not spending wisely. If you think of a manager with a business like this, what kinds of things might he not spend wisely? One example would be the plumber. That's a good illustration, I think.
Maybe buying too much goods that then spoil or don't get used.
Okay, so maybe he buys a Sam's Club when he should only buy a Tops because he doesn't use it all and it spoils. Okay, that's a possibility.
Well, in business, you have a business plan, and the plan would include, how you're going to use your money, budgeting things and that, and if you don't have that type of plan in place, then you just spend willy-nilly, and you're just spending foolishly.
Okay, good. Suggestion is that he doesn't maybe have a plan to how he's going to utilize the expenditures, various aspects of the business and so forth, and so there's waste involved in that.
Somehow the manager is using the goods of the master for his own benefit, even if he's just trading favors.
Okay, so he's not managing properly the resources of the master. So maybe long lunches,
throwing parties, long lunches. and
Parties, okay.
Vendors will in turn trade back to him.
Okay, so maybe going to expensive restaurants for lunch and having, entertaining various clients and so forth in an extravagant way could be something.
Maybe 2 ledger books.
Okay, now if you have 2 ledger books, Phil, you kind of want to make this guy dishonest here. So we're going to ask guys back there to keep an eye on you. Maybe there are two copies of the books.
But the debtor has a book also, and so that manager cuts out from 100 and down to 50.
Okay, you're getting ahead of us in the story there. All right, okay. So there are various ways. Maybe the office is very lavishly equipped. Maybe there's very expensive furniture instead of cheap office furniture. Maybe there are vacations provided or bonuses provided that should not be provided. There are various ways that a manager can be wasteful with the resources of the owner. All right, Sean?
I was just thinking, could it be really a matter of stewardship?
Stewardship?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's where it's going, right?
yeah.
In terms of how you handle those funds. So at any rate, this manager is presumed by the owner to be wasteful in terms of how he is handling the affairs. So what does he do?
He calls him to account. He says, I want an accounting for what's going on.
Good. The owner says, I want you to give me a copy of the books. I want you to render an account. We don't know if there's 2 accounts or there's 1, but he's got to render an account of his stewardship, of his management. And in addition to that, he says what?
He's fired.
You can no longer be the manager. So the handwriting's on the wall. The job's coming to an end. Whatever it is, the owner, the master, has made a decision already that he's not going to continue with this manager. So he has apparently enough information about reports that have been given and so forth that he's made the decision this guy's going to be fired. When?
On the spot. He was fired right there.
On what spot? Wait, be careful.
After he gives an accounting.
After he provides an accounting, right? So he's asked, the manager is asked to provide an accounting of his management, of his stewardship, and he's going to have to turn those books in. So I don't know if this happens on a Friday afternoon or a Thursday or whatever, and the meeting with the owner, with the master, is on Monday. Whatever it is, there's a little bit of time involved. So what does the manager do?
Does everybody change what they owe?
Pardon me?
Doesn't he have everybody change what they owe?
Yeah, he tries to come up with a solution. What does he say about himself first? You remember?
He's too weak to dig.
Yeah, he says, I'm too soft to dig. So, what's probably the history here?
He was lack.
He was promoted to the height of his incompetence.
Okay, so the Peter principle or whatever that is involved maybe. He has been behind the desk too long, and he doesn't feel strong enough to dig, to work manually. And in addition to that, he says, I am too proud to beg, so I don't want to beg. What is implied by both of those statements about himself?
He doesn't want to work for money.
All right, he doesn't want to work necessarily, maybe. What else is implied?
He won't be able to work after this.
It's all beneath him.
Pardon me?
It's beneath him.
It's beneath him, yes, okay.
He won't be able to work after this.
He's not going to be able to work, okay. Maybe he gets a bad rep or whatever as a result of this. What else is implied?
He's not financially independent.
He's not financially independent. Okay, good. He doesn't have the wherewithal to, quote unquote, retire at this point. So he's in a pinch. So not only has he squandered the master's possessions, but he apparently has already also squandered his own, or at least he is not prepared for a rainy day. So he has to come up with a solution. So what he does is he says, people to welcome him into their homes after he is let go, after he's fired. So now we get to the process that he's going to work out here. He calls the debtors of his master on the scene and decides to work out an arrangement with them. Here's a maybe modern day kind of thing. He has the debtors change the bill. So what happens first? He asked the first man, what do you owe my master? You remember what it was? 100 measures of oil. Okay. So what kind of business is he involved in? Is this a gas station? Okay. Probably something to do with olives. Or somebody suggested one time maybe it was a bakery. But if you have a bakery, you most likely are not going to owe the master oil. You would owe the master oil if you are farming or tending an olive orchard that's owned by the master. What do rich people do the world over?
Invest
Okay, and how? Invest, yes.
in other businesses or
Use credit.
Use credit?
Buy things on credit.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's right. But now we're talking about not the manager, but the wealthy man, the master. What do rich people do all over the world? We have it all around us, even today.
Buy things cheap and sell it at a higher rate.
Yeah, they try to buy cheap and sell at a higher rate. Everybody tries to do that.
Renting, like rent out, like have someone else work land or.
They buy land, right? In most cases, they buy land or other aspects of real estate, and they develop the land. And then they lease it out. So what we have most likely is a wealthy man who owns 1 or 2 or 3 olive groves, and one of the debtors here owes 100 measures of oil. Now, how would that work?
He pays the master olive oil for a living for farming his olive groves.
Okay, so 100 measures of oil is what he's going to get for the whole year? Would you do that? Would you rent an olive grove if you were going to get 100 measures of oil from those olives for the year? No. You're anticipating you're going to get what? 300 or 400 measures of oil, right? And the rent is 100 measures. Okay, so that's how it works. It's like sharecropping. All right, it's done the world over. And today we don't have in our area so much olive groves. Or the next guy was a wheat farmer. He owed 100 measures of wheat, so he had wheat fields, and his rent for using those fields to get a crop of wheat was 100 measures of wheat. We'd have some of that nowadays, but more likely in our culture it looks a little different. What do we have nowadays that people do, where wealthy people invest and then lease? Cash, okay, yeah. But we're talking about property, buying property, investing, developing, and then leasing.
Rental homes and apartments and stuff.
All right, could be homes or apartments. What's all around us everywhere are strip malls, right? So a man buys a piece of land, he goes to the town and gets approval to build a strip mall. He develops that piece of land into a strip mall, and then he leases out. You have a pizza shop, you have a dry cleaners, you have nail salon, you have various kinds of things. So it takes a little different shape in our culture, but it's the exact same principle that Jesus is using for his culture. So, what does he do now with these debtors? He says to the man who owes 100 measures of oil, sit down and write 50. Okay? So the bill is reduced from 100 measures of oil to 50 measures. Now, how would you feel about that? It all depends on who you are, right? If you're the master, the owner, how would you feel? You feel like...
But I mean, if they weren't gonna pay it anyway, and they paid at least half of it, at least there was something got paid.
Okay, so maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's we're getting what we can out of it. Or maybe he says, you know, I should have just told him to bring the books and not told him what I was going to do, or whatever. But in the story, Jesus allows this man room to negotiate like this. If you're the debtor, if you're the one who is taking care of the olive grove or the wheat field, how do you feel?
It would depend if you were honest or dishonest as a land's worker.
I'm sorry?
If you agreed to a price to use the land, and then the manager came to you and said, I'm going to reduce it, you'd think, something weird here going on?
Okay.
I already agreed to pay the higher price.
So you wouldn't take it, Ron?
I'd have a rough time.
You would? Okay. Anybody else feel that way? I don't know about you, but I'd take it in a heartbeat. Suppose you bought a car and the bank came to you a year into your car payments and said, tell you what, we've been doing really well as a bank this year. Why don't you just cut all your car payments in half? You wouldn't take that. Now, Ron probably wouldn't. But Michelle, we could have her, she'd take it, right? She'd say, come on, Ron, or whatever. So what happens is that the manager negotiates a lower debt for the various debtors of the rich man, the various farmers and whatever that are involved. And he's anticipating what?
Some money's better to give to the boss than none.
Well, some is still coming in to the account. The manager is managing the affairs of the owner. So the 100 measures of oil are due to the company, if you will, to the management, not to the individual manager. So when he reduces it to 50 measures of oil are still coming to the owner, to the wealthy man. The debtors will feel great to the manager. The bank manager who came and offered you that car payment deal, you'd feel really great. If he asked you for a lift to the airport or whatever, you'd do that in a heartbeat, right? You feel really great about that. So what he's doing is he's creating friends here as he seeks an answer to his problem. And what's interesting is in Jesus' words, the owner says that the manager has been very shrewd. The words, if I read them from the text for us again, go like this. He says, his master, that's the owner, praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. So, what does he praise the manager for?
For his dishonesty, which lets you know that the owner perhaps took the same approach.
Okay, it's very interesting that you would say that. The ESV uses the term dishonest manager. But there's nothing in the story anywhere that actually says he's dishonest. What it does say is what? Well, before that, before the shrewd part, he's wasteful. He's not a good manager. And so you have to be careful. Sometimes translations can be misleading. It doesn't really say that he is dishonest. It says he is an unjust or a not just manager. In other words, he's not doing the perfect job of managing. But there isn't anything particular about being dishonest. Now, was it wrong for him to reduce what the debtors owe or not? How many say that was wrong for him to do?
It's within his job authority.
That's what I.
That's it. It's within what?
His authority.
It's within his authority as the manager to do it. So he hasn't done anything dishonest. He hasn't done anything that is criminal. Now, as far as the owner is concerned, he hasn't sought the best interest of the owner because he's seeking what? The best interest of himself in the deal. And so the owner, when he says this, says, you know what? That guy is really sharp. He's really shrewd when it comes to negotiating these deals.
Isn't he double down? He's doubling down on the squandering loan.
Exactly, but he lost his job already.
Yeah. He's already lost the job. He's already going to be taken away from managing.
Yeah, he knows, but he needs something for after.
He's looking to prepare the way for himself afterwards, to have friends who will maybe put him up for a few days or whatever might be involved in that process. So he's looking for ways to provide for himself when the stewardship or the management is taken away from him. All right? So Jesus then turns that with the disciples, and he says to them, he doesn't praise the management, but he praises the shrewdness of the individual, and he exhorts us to the same kind of shrewdness. What does he say? Sorry?
The sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their generation.
Okay, the sons of this world would be what? He says the sons of this world are more shrewd than the sons of light. So the sons of this world would be unbelievers, right? And the sons of light would be believers. So he says that worldly people are often more shrewd than believers. And then he says this. He says in verse 9, I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. What's Jesus saying? Make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, that they may welcome you into the eternal dwellings.
Sons of darkness, make friends with the other darkness, because that's where you're headed?
No.
He's trying to imply?
No, he's talking now to the sons of light.
The unrighteous wealth is the world system.
So you're to use your drug money.
No, you use whatever profits you have in excess. Not that it's ungotten gains, but that it's the worldly way that, it's barter and trade and pay.
Okay, good. Now, we're going to come back to this in a couple of minutes as we wrap up what the point Jesus is making from the parable. But what I also want to show you this morning is the nature of this management. Because this management is a model for how we should view world history. All right? So, as we proceed now, there are 3 biblical words in the passage. They're all related, as you can see. And you can read Greek. You can read oikonomia. What does oikonomia sound like? Economy. All right, very good. Oikonomos is a masculine singular noun. And then oikonomeo is the verb form. So these 3 words comprise the New Testament teaching with regard to oikonomia. 3 words in one family. One is the feminine singular, one is masculine singular, and one is the verb. And here's all the places that these 3 words occur in the New Testament. They occur 20 times. 7 times they occur in this parable. The verb form, which only occurs once, oikonomos, occurs twice in the passage, and oikonomia occurs 3 times. Actually, there are 7 usages, as we can see in the passage. So this becomes a central passage for understanding the concept of oikonomia. Other references in the New Testament are really developed from this. So what we have is this term oikonomia. It comes from the Greek to the French, oikonomie, to our English economy. And there are 4 basic features to this oikonomia. There are 2 parties involved. There is a birthday party and no, not that kind of party. There are 2 parties. Who are the 2 parties in our story? The manager and the owner, the rich man. So there are 2 people involved, 2 parties, 2 sides in this management arrangement. There's a responsibility. What's the responsibility?
To act in the best interest of the master.
The responsibility is the manager is to manage what has been entrusted to him by the owner. In this case, several fields or whatever else may be involved, strip malls or whatever. The accountability. Where's the accountability?
The manager's accountable.
Okay, the owner comes and says, you have to give an account of your management. So he is responsible to provide an accounting. And then there is the possibility of change. What kind of change happens in this story? He gets fired. All right? What other kind of change might there be? He might be promoted. He might say, the owner could say, you've done such a great job with the olive groves and the wheat fields. I want to give you also my several apartment complexes to manage. And he could give him a promotion. He could move in that direction. So that's the nature of management. That's the nature of a stewardship, is it has these 4 features. In the New Testament, there are 3 types. There's, first of all, occupational management or stewardship, and that's what we have in this story, as well as a couple of other passages. In Romans 16, we have the city treasurer or the city manager who's mentioned. And then we also have ministerial stewardship. And so Paul says that it's required of stewards that they be found faithful. A steward is an individual who's given a responsibility for ministry. Could be a Sunday school class, it could be being the pastor of a church, it could be the head of a missions organization, it could be a missionary or whatever. Whatever the ministry is given, is assigned, doesn't belong to us. It's a responsibility that's entrusted to us by God for us to manage, for us to run well to the glory of God. All right? And so in this list, we have also then a 3rd type of stewardship or management, and that's a theological management. And so 2 of the references, the Apostle Paul clearly identifies 2 different oikonomias, 2 different managements, 2 different stewardships, if you will, that are on a global nature. Here they are, and that would be our term dispensation, for those of you who have a background in dispensationalism. Here are the references. Ephesians 1:10, we read that Paul says, with a view to an administration suitable to the fullness of times. So there's some kind of administration, some kind of oikonomia, some kind of management that has to do with the fullness of times. The fullness of times in the passage is a reference to the millennial kingdom. It's a future management. And then also in chapter 3 of Ephesians verse 9, Paul says that it was given to him as part of his responsibility, part of his ministry stewardship, verse 3:2, to bring to light what is the administration of the mystery which has now been revealed. And the mystery which has now been revealed is something different, a different administration from the previous administration. So the administration which has now been revealed is the church. So Paul names two of the managements. And by naming two of them, he implies at least a third. Because there's a management of the church which has been revealed, which has replaced something that was before it. And that's clearly laid out in these verses in Ephesians chapter 3. So, what I want you to see today is this concept of management or administration. Because I believe that the whole realm of God's history is organized in several administrations. And Lord willing, next week, we're going to look at those administrations, how they work, how they're set up by God, and what is expected of the people who live, the people who are part of that administration. What's interesting is that Jesus is the one in this parable who gives us the best explanation of a quote-unquote management or an administration, and it's clearly discernible in this story of the man who was squandering what he had available to him and didn't do it well. Now, back to our story as we wrap up the principle. What Jesus is saying is that there is, going the wrong way, that there is a single master. You either serve money or you serve God, right? That's the bottom line in the parable here. So what he's saying is, it's a matter of how we conduct our personal stewardship. He says the sons of this age are more shrewd than the sons of light. And then he urges us as sons of light to be shrewd. And shrewdness is that we would make friends for heaven. So Jesus is saying that you and I should buy friends, right?
I think that's where we struggle with this parable, because I look at it and I'm like, is the manager serving money, or is he a picture of serving God? I'm confused on that.
Okay. So he's a man who didn't manage well, but at the end he got real shrewd.
Right.
And Jesus is saying he's more shrewd than most of us. So now he's saying for you and me to be shrewd, we ought to be doing what?
Building currency for the future.
No.
Copying what that man did.
We should be copying what that man did. So what did he do?
Made bonds.
He used his position to make friends to welcome him into their homes. Right? Go like this. And now Jesus says in verse 9, I say to you, make friends by means of the wealth of unrighteousness. So Jesus wants us to make friends with what?
Cheaters.
With money, with the wealth of unrighteousness, with whatever it is that you and I possess. He wants us to make friends, he says, so that when it fails, when what fails? The money, or the wealth, or the position, or the clout, or whatever it is, when that fails, they will welcome you into the eternal dwellings. What's that all about?
So I think that we're supposed to use the wealth that the Master has given us so as to make friends with those who are of the world, to win them, to win the lost, to win their hearts to eternity.
All right, great. If I had a chalkboard up here, I'd put a check mark up there for you. That's what Pastor Dave does, right? So what he's saying is, use the wealth of unrighteousness. Use everyday things. Use your money, use your position, use your job, use your influence, whatever. Athletes have an influence that they can use to make friends who will welcome you into the eternal dwellings. Phil?
Could we say to pay forward our eternal rewards in heaven?
You could, as long as you don't have 2 sets of books.
Well, the books will be open at the
The
end.
books are going to be open, right? Okay. Yes.
Just thinking of Paul's statement, I can be all things to all people. I think he was taking advantage of that very thing to get into the cultures that he
Okay.
was enlisted in.
Yeah. Good.
To bring Christ to them.
All right.
When it was palatable.
What did Jesus say he was going to do? John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places, and I go to prepare a place for you. So when we get to heaven, what are we going to do in heaven? Have you got a harp? I don't think we're going to sit on the clouds strumming harps. I think we're going to have a condo in heaven. Now, some of you, my wife likes the King James Version, mansion. In my Father's house are many mansions. But I think it's probably going to be condos. So, any idea how many?
Oddly enough, I calculated the other day.
You know, we both have twisted minds, you and I.
I'm thinking about AI. What does the New Jerusalem look like?
Okay, let me just run through this. 1 square mile is how many square feet? 27,878 square feet, 878,000 square feet. If you have 1,000 square foot condo, how many condos on 1 floor in heaven?
How high is the ceiling?
Doesn't matter for 1 floor. For 1 floor, there are about 27,000 condos on 1 floor. Now, heaven is also 1,500 miles high, so I figured that's approximately 792,000 floors in heaven. So 792,000 times 27,000 comes out to 21.3 billion condos in the New Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not. And in the center is God himself on the throne, so part of the space is taken up. You know what you're going to have on the doorway as you go in? You know how the Jewish people have this mezuzah on the door, and every time they go in and out the door, they reach over and they kiss the mezuzah and so on? On the outside of your door in your condo in heaven, you're going to have a little computer that prints out. And it's going to print out the names of everybody who ever had a part in your heritage in bringing you to faith in Jesus. It may be somebody who's your Sunday school teacher, your grandmother's Sunday school teacher, somebody who witnessed to you on a bus somewhere, whatever. People who invested in your lives, people who gave. Some of you have served in ministry and people have given over the years. And you're going to have a printout of all of those people. And you're going to have thousands of years to invite them into your condo to share with them your testimony about what God has done in your life. And there's also going to be a list of all those people that you have served, that you have ministered to in some way. You gave money to a missionary in Ukraine or in the Congo or wherever. And that went in God's books. And the computer's going to print out the names of those people, and you're going to call them up in heaven and say, hey, can we get together for a cup of coffee? And so what Jesus is saying is, use whatever you have to make friends who will welcome you into their eternal dwellings. One of my favorite sayings when I'm trying to witness to people is, my goal in life is to go to heaven when I die and take as many people with me as possible. And I found that to be very positively received by people. I think that needs to be our goal in everything we do. We use our boats, we use our homes, we use our cars, we use our bank accounts, we use our influence, we use whatever we have as shrewdly as possible to make friends that we'll meet up with one day in glory, and they will call you and say, can you come over on Saturday evening for a cup of coffee and a piece of apple pie? I want to share with you how you impacted my life. And we'll have these stories that we're sharing throughout all of eternity. That's what eternity is going to be. It's going to be A, worshiping in the presence of God, like the 24 elders around the thrones and so forth. And then B, it's going to be worshiping by sharing with one another what God has done in our lives and how we have served and we have been served. And Jesus says, friend, be as shrewd as that unrighteous manager was for his personal ambition. Be that shrewd for your entrance into glory and for people to receive you into their heavenly condos. By the way, in a condo, you don't need more than 1,000 feet because you don't need a bedroom and you don't need a bathroom. All you need is a living room and an eat-in kitchen. And then a study, because we're going to be in God's Word forever. Father, help us as we seek to be shrewd stewards in all that you have provided for us. We have so much in this world. We are so wasteful with so much. And we're going to leave so much behind. As we were in that estate store yesterday, looking at all of those things that people have left behind. Help us, Father, to be shrewd managers of whatever it is you've given for the glory of Jesus, as well as for our own benefit. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you.